It's June 28th, 2022. We're in Daytona Beach, Florida, to interview Richard Davenport from Chipley High School, recently retired. I understand that you had many homes before you moved to Florida in about the 5th grade. Tell us about it.
I was a Navy brat. My dad was in the Navy. We moved to several different places, including Guam and California and Hawaii and Washington State. And we moved to the Pensacola area, and my dad retired. After we moved there, I was in 5th grade, and then my dad retired a few years later. So I stayed there and finished throughout the Gulf Breeze school system. Started beginning band at Gulf Breeze Middle School under John Henley. Then he moved to the high school the following year, and I had Bob Monzingo for a year, and then he moved to a different school, and then had Patty Heath my 8th grade year, and then finished out my high school career at Gulf Breeze High School with John Henley for 3 of those years, and then Tom Buck came in my senior year. I played tuba and euphonium for all of those years, mostly tuba, and took private lessons from Richard Niemeyer over in Pensacola my junior and senior year, and had the privilege of being in the 1984 Florida All-State Band in Daytona Beach many moons ago. And that I just really developed a love of music from being in the programs with those men, growing up in Gulf Breeze and getting the opportunities to perform that I did. And one thing that Mr. Henley got me involved in, which really made me want to become a band director, was that he was originally from Arkansas. And so he would take us to Dixie Band Camp in Jonesboro, Arkansas. I believe that's Arkansas State. I can't really remember. But we would go up there every summer, and then I think I did that for 3 years. And then my junior year, I was asked to be on staff or try out to be on staff. And I was actually on the student staff for that my last 2 years. And getting to run sectionals and teach things and do a lot of the background work, I thought, this is something I really want to do. I thought I was going to be a veterinarian, but I really loved doing this kind of stuff more than I did wanting to be a veterinarian. So I ended up going to Florida State University. I went to Tri-State Honor Band my senior year and just absolutely fell in love with the faculty there and the campus. And it was really the first time I'd ever been there, even though it was an hour and a half away from where I was living, or 2 hours away, I guess, from where I was living. And I guess the rest is history. I finished at Florida State under Jim Croft, who had a huge impact on my life, and Bentley Schellhammer, who still has a big impact on my life. It was very privileged to work with those two men, and of course Paul Ebers was my private teacher as a tuba player. I graduated in December, which is not a good time for a teacher to graduate, looking for a job. So I actually worked at Kmart for a while, and then Dr. Schellhammer called me and said, hey, here's a job I want you to really consider applying for. And it was ironic because I was from the Pensacola area, went to school in Tallahassee. I put in applications in every county between Escambia County and Leon County, except for 2, Jackson and Washington, because I knew nothing about either one of those counties. And ironically, that first job was in Jackson County at Mariana High School. It was an assistant position. The assistant director had left to take another job out of state in February, and so I started working there in March and finished out the year. Worked for another 4 years, and then one of the other schools in Jackson County came open, Graceville High School. So I jumped at the opportunity to do my own program. I figured I knew it all by then, and jumped into my own program at Graceville. Stayed there for 6 years, and then moved to Chipley High School in 1999, and stayed there for 23, and just recently retired after 33 years teaching. From Chipley High School, and that was in Washington County, which was also the other county that I never put in an application for. So it was kind of ironic how that happened, but just really enjoyed my time in that in the rural area of North Florida. Had some really great bands during that time at all 3 of those schools, especially at Chipley. Just really enjoyed a lot of success. And two of the things I had to overcome as a young teacher was, first of all, I thought I knew everything. And that first MPA I went to, concert MPA, we got straight 3s. And I was devastated. I came from a really good high school program, never knew anything but superiors. We went to state every year. When I took my first band and ended up with those 3s, I didn't know what to do. But one of the judges was F. Lewis Jones.
Oh.
And this is kind of a great story. Lewis was actually my solo and ensemble judge my junior year at state, and he gave me an excellent. And it was well deserved after he talked to me and told me what all was going on. I had him the next year. I'm sorry, that was my junior year. I had him at district. He gave me a 2 at district one year and gave me a 2 at state the next year. And that's when I decided to get serious as a tuba player. So that must have been sophomore, junior, because senior year was much better after I started taking lessons. But Lewis did the same thing. He probably doesn't remember, and I know he doesn't because we had this conversation before he passed away. But I told him that was my inspirational point in high school of when to become a better musician. And one of the points of when I became a better teacher, or at least knew what direction to go into, one of those MPA judges at that MPA, my very first MPA, was F. Lewis Jones. Bob Hansbrough and I think James Smith from Troy was the other one. But I remember being depressed the whole rest of that weekend, reevaluating my life. And then on Monday morning, my office phone rang, and he said, "Richard, this is Lewis Jones." And I said, "Yes, sir." And I thought, oh God, he's going to lambaste me and tell me I need to get out of band directing. But no, he said, "Here's my address. You tell me what night you want to drive over here to Tallahassee, and we're going to sit down and talk." And I said, "Yes, sir." And we picked a date, and I did that probably once a month for about 6 months, and then maybe once every 6 months for a few years after that. And Lewis and I became really good friends. He was the first real mentor I had. I had student taught with Ernest Hepson, and of course, Ernest and I are great friends, and he's also an important mentor in my life. But there was so much information to get from him in a short period of time that Lewis was able to kind of guide me through those first years of teaching. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And we shared that friendship all the way until he passed away. Even when I served on the board, I would stop in Tallahassee at the nursing home and go hang out with him for an hour or two on the way there and the way back. And got to do the same thing with Dwayne a little bit when he was ill before he passed. But some great times traveling up I-75 and I-10. But the other challenge that I experienced as a band director was it took me probably 10 years before I was comfortable inviting somebody into my band room to tell me what my kids were doing well and what they weren't doing well. And by then I had figured out the MPA thing, and I figured out how to get that superior and really instill in my kids a sense of what good tone quality was, and sonority. That was a big thing with me, still is. But it took me a long time to invite people in to my room, and I would always wait until like 2 weeks before MPA because I never had the guts to bring them in when the kids really needed to know what to do. And finally, I had to sit down with Joe Hooten one summer, and he said, you need to ask me to come in like 2 months before MPA. And I said, "Joe, I can't do that. I can't do that. My band's too bad. You can't." He said, "No, that's when I need to come in there." And so he talked me into it. And from that day forward, I made sure I'd never bring people in any more than 2 or 3 weeks before MPA, or any earlier, any later than that rather, as I bring them in as early as I can, because didn't take me long once I did that to figure out that's how your band gets better. That's how I get better as a teacher. It's because those folks would share their wisdom and their ideas with my students and with me, and then would give me time to implement it, and they would build on that. And being at a small school, and all 3 of the programs that I taught at were either C or double C schools in very small communities. And there's a stigma out there that you can't be successful, and band programs can't be successful at small schools. And I challenged that. And it took me a while to overcome that myself. But realizing that I could do a lot of the things without a lot of the resources that larger programs have in larger communities. Because I was able to build relationships with those kids and share my musical knowledge, bring all these people in to share their knowledge with them. And they felt kind of special that they were a unique program in the middle of nowhere that was successful. And when I went to Chipley High School, Chipley had a reputation of being a not very good program for a very long time. I was very fortunate that the person that I followed there did a really good job of building the program back up. And then I just kind of slid in there and took it where he left off and built it to what it is now. And just very fortunate because not only building the relationship with those kids, but being in a small town, I was able to build that relationship with with their parents. And our community was always super supportive. It took a little while to get there. The first 3 or 4 years was a little tough, but once people realized, hey, this is a thing I want to stand behind. My current superintendent that's still there at Washington County has only missed one concert or one MPA that we've performed at over the last 12 years. And that was because he was in Tallahassee during state one year fighting for money for our new campus. And I told him that was cool. And he felt bad about it, but he has traveled with us to every state MPA. He has come to a few states on ensembles around when they were in the North Florida area. He's been to every district MPA that we've performed at, and he really does that for both the schools in our county. Being a small county, it's easier for him to do that, but he's been real supportive. I've been fortunate to have a lot of school board kids whose parents were on the school board, but also ones that don't have that relationship have always been really supportive in that town. And we've created a band town out of the town of Chipley, Florida, and I'm very humbled and proud at the same time by that. And I really feel like we had this conversation before you turned the camera on, that of course my faith is very important to me, and what the doors and opportunities that God has opened for me and the success that he has blessed me with have done nothing but strengthen my faith. I met my wife in those counties, in Jackson County, and she actually lived in Jackson County as I worked in Washington County. And so I put down roots there, and she has helped me develop that community relationship along with that faith. But I just trying to be the band guy in a small town and still be humble at the same time, and try to instill that humility in my students and anybody that I come across, I think has been blessed by God and what he's been able to do through me and through that band program and through that community. And I just feel very satisfied with my career as I step away from that.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. What words of wisdom do you have to give to new directors, struggling directors, burned out directors? You've met all those challenges.
Oh, yeah.
How? Why?
There is nothing that can describe standing in front of that band when they're giving the performance of their lives that year. And it gets a little bit better every year. And knowing how I feel and how the kids feel, and the sense of accomplishment, the hard work that they've gotten to get there, and I compare that to what I've done over my career, the hard work that I've put in to enjoy the success that I was blessed with, and that every year drives me to come back and do it again. And even as I retire, I'm contemplating, what do I want to do? Because I still want to teach. I still want to make music. I still have that passion. So who knows what doors are going to be open for that. But so the advice I have is, number one, don't give up. If you love it, you're in the right place. If you have a passion for it, you're in the right place. And one of the things that took me a while to figure out as a young teacher was to look at the big picture. If you have a bad day, figure out what it was that made it bad, walk away from it, do it better the next day. And don't let that influence you, except in a positive way, into where you go next. When we've all had those kids that we just want to throttle and throw out of the band room. Have my share of those over the years. But a lot of those kids have come back to me over the years and said, Mr. D, thank you so much for being hard on me. Thank you for putting those parameters on me, saying this is what I had to do in order to succeed, because I'm pretty sure you kept me out of jail, or you helped me be successful in my job, or whatever. And then that's the big picture is very important as a teacher, especially these days. We have come through probably the hardest 2.5, 3 years of my teaching career. And fortunately, I lived in the part of Florida that chose not to participate in the pandemic. That's a running joke in our part of Florida. But We weren't hit nearly as hard as a lot of programs were, but it was still hard. I mean, the apathy of the kids coming back from the few months of online learning that we tried to do, and getting them motivated back to finding where their goals were and getting them to push toward that goals was a year and a half, 2-year process. But I feel like we finally got to that point before we went home for the spring, or for the summer, the spring. So number 1 is don't give up. Keep the big picture in mind would be number 2. And number 3, just remember what you're doing and why you're doing it. And if you have a passion for that, that's what's important. You know, I was fortunate that that's the passion that God put in me, was to teach kids to make music and to learn life skills through being in band that would make them successful later on in life. And those roadblocks come in huge baseball bats across the head, and they come as kicks in the butt. But you just got to figure out a way to get around it. And number 4, we'll go back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, is don't be afraid to ask folks for help. There are a plethora of band directors out there, even in my part of the state that's so spread out and so rural. There are people that will travel 60 miles to come stand in my band room and talk to my kids and listen to them and make them better people and make them better musicians. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about the Florida Bandmasters and the band director fraternity in our state, is that the vast majority of us want to see everybody succeed. So, yeah, ask for help.
Yeah, wow.
Definitely.
Good things to keep in mind. You talked a little bit about your personal character. I'd like you to expand on that, about the walking the walk and leading by example.
Yeah. My dad retired as a Master Chief Petty Officer in the Navy after 32 years. And we didn't do a lot of messing around at my house, me and my 2 brothers. The law was definitely laid down. We lived by the old-fashioned piece of wood to the bottom, that kind of thing. So discipline was very important. But for him, our character was the most important thing. And he was not a church-going man, but he made sure he dropped us off at church, at Sunday school, as a kid. And church became a very important thing to me. It was a place where I felt like I belonged, and then as I got involved in band, obviously, that was another place where I felt I belonged. But my faith and the greatest teacher that I've ever had is my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And when nothing else is going right, I know He's there. And I know He's going to keep pushing me in the right direction. And there have been times when I've sat at home, like that very first MPA experience, and I sat at home and I said, Lord, what are you telling me? Are you telling me, is this a test, or are you telling me it's time to change careers? You've wasted your time. And he kind of led me away from that. And of course, Lewis was also a man of deep faith, and he and I shared that back and forth and had a lot of conversations about that, especially in those early years when he was helping me realize that these were just bumps in the road and that God had a bigger plan for me. And so I've always felt like my faith drives everything that I do. I try to be a man of good character. I try to be humble. I've tried to use the skills that He's given me, and I think leadership and teaching are two of those skills that He's given me. Talking is not one of them, but I do the best I can. But I feel like that, as you mentioned, I tried to walk the walk because I think it's important for those kids to see a role model. My students, as well as my own children, they need to see the same role model in the band room as they do walking across campus to the cafeteria, as they do at Walmart, because in my town, that's the place where everybody goes. And they need to see that same person. They need to see that same person at church, at the ball field, regardless. And that's always been real important to me. And I do credit my dad for instilling that in me. But being the person that I want to be and the person that I am is very important to me. And I feel like that my faith drives that.
Mm-hmm. How difficult was it, or what a pleasure was it, to have your own child in your band?
Oh, goodness. Definitely a pleasure. Both my children, my son, came through my program first. He was a trumpet player, switched over to French horn, became a very fine French horn player. and also ended up being my drum major. And then my daughter followed a very similar path 4 years later. Never had both of them in there at the same time, which was kind of disappointing. That's okay. God had other plans. My kids were 8 years apart, so. But they both love playing their instruments, and the three of us make up the core of our church orchestra. So we get to play together every Sunday, at least until my daughter moves off to college this fall. But what a great pleasure to not only teach, and of course I view them all as my kids, but to share that experience with my own kids. And I never really said, you have to be in band. My wife and I have always been really good about what is it, where do you feel like you're being led to do? What is it you feel like, what do you enjoy doing? And is that where you think you belong? And so the things that we've allowed our kids to participate in is something that they wanted to do, and they wanted to do it well and enjoy it. And both of them are amazing musicians. They're both really good French horn players. My daughter also sings. In fact, she probably sings better than she plays French horn. And I had nothing to do with that. So that was a God thing. And we've had some really good teachers that have worked with her the last couple of years too. But Richard Wayne chose not to do music as a career, but he's a very successful civil engineer, but he still enjoys playing. He's actually dating a clarinet player, so at least he's got good taste. My daughter is going to be majoring in music industry at Troy University this fall, so she has chosen music as a career. She's not real sure where she wants to go with that yet, but I was able to instill my values in them, not only at home and in the activities that they did outside of my room, but also they not only did they learn from me, but they also played a very important part in the leadership and the musical achievement that I enjoyed as the teacher of the Chipley Band program. Both of them were John Philip Sousa Award winners, and they earned it. Both of them were my drum major, I mentioned that, and then again, they earned that. We have a very complicated process to make sure that we get the right person in there, so it's not just dad picking them. So I was very fortunate that they stood on their own very well, and we're very blessed by that.
What is your approach when a fine musician comes to you and says, I'm quitting band, I'm going to play football, go on the film crew, do something else?
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you deal with that?
A lot of times it's because, I live in a small town, so, and the economy is not real good there. The lifestyle is not, it's middle class and below. And so a lot of the kids feel obligated to work for the family, and they feel obligated to help out. They feel like that's an important process. So what I learned to do at Chipley was to work with those kids, encourage them to stick around. If that meant that they weren't in marching band because they couldn't do the rehearsal schedule because they had to work, then we just made that work. I let them play in the stands on Friday night, and then they just helped out moving equipment at halftime if they were able to come on Friday night if they weren't working. But I didn't want them to lose that band experience, that band family, and the goal-setting skills and the hard-working skills, because one of the things that I'm very satisfied with, I guess is a good word, is that there are places in our town, like the Piggly Wiggly store and certain restaurants, that when they want to hire a kid, if they're a band kid, there's no interview. They hire those kids because they know they've been through my program, and they know that these are the skills that those kids have. And I'm very overwhelmed by that and thankful for that and humbled by that, I guess. But it's a cool thing. It really is. That tells me that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing to help those kids be successful in life. And I work with those kids that come to me and say, even if it's not a good player, you need to be in band. You need band more than band needs you. You need to be here. And a lot of those kids, as I mentioned before, are ones that come back to me we have a big watermelon festival is the big thing in Chipley, and we have a big country concert that happens the day before that. And every year there, I see kids that I haven't seen in 20 years, and they'll come up to me and say, Mr. D, this is my family, and I tell them all the time, this is what I learned in band, and what an important person you were in my life, and what the band saved me. And so I try to take that approach with every single kid and try to keep them in the program, even if it's just jazz band or something that doesn't require after school very much. just so that they'll stay involved, because it's about the kids first, and then it's about making music. When you teach at a small program that, I set the standard, there's not a lot of community, hey, you have to go to state and come home with 1 million trophies. There's not that fun, that mindset. So it's about the kid. And so I encourage them that.
That's fantastic. You were able to do quality music. Why is that important in a small place like Chipley?
It's kind of like the Music Man. I'm the Harold Hill of the community, and I take that role very seriously, even though I'm not really the only music professional in the town or in the community. But they're going to get the wealth of their musical knowledge to use as consumers of music in life from me. So it's always been important to me to be able to provide them with musical experiences that they can know the difference between a good piece and a bad piece. I remember sitting through a sight reading clinic with Bob Sheldon years ago at one of these clinics, one of these conventions, and he made the comment about, you'll know whether it's a great piece of music or if it's an appropriate piece of music for your kids in the first 20 measures by the way they play it. And that holds true to this day. And one of my more favorite experiences in the latter part of my career would be after that last football game, I would pass out a bunch of concert music, and we would just sight read stuff. And I would put some pieces of poo-poo out there, and I would put some really good pieces out there, just to see if the kids would go, no, we don't want to play this. I don't like this piece. Or, man, that was really great. Can we work on this? Can we do this for MPA? And I never talked about grades of music with these kids, with my kids, because they get hung up on those numbers. And so we would just talk about, why is this a great piece of music? What do you feel like you can say something with this piece of music? Is this going to be worth working on for you? Is it going to make you grow as a musician? Is it going to make me grow as a teacher by pulling you so that we can meet the expectation of the music? And that's what drove me as a teacher, especially the last 10 years of my career, was making sure those kids got as similar experience out of that music as I did. And one of the last pieces we played this year for State MPA, we played Whole Singers on a hymn song of Philip Bliss. Oh. And of course, you know what my faith means to me. So it was a privilege to get to not only perform that piece, but the kids, whether they're religious or not, they understood the story behind it and the heartbreak of the loss of Bliss's family in a shipwreck, and how he used his faith to convert that into this hymn that talks about redemption and salvation and forgiveness and all of those things that these kids need to learn this day and time, teaching those life skills. And that performance at State in Niceville was one of the most, I'm going to get emotional just thinking about it, one of the most fulfilling performances for me. Did it get superiors? No, because we're a small school band and that's really hard for that to happen at State. If I had really great performers at every chair, it might have happened. But and of course there's always elements, but the rating isn't important. What did you guys think about that performance? They were in tears. I was in tears. And to have some of my mentors, I don't know how State is around the rest of the state, but in Northwest Florida, there's a whole row of usually retired directors plus other directors from this area. And they all sit like a couple rows behind her in front of the judges. And those are the guys that I want to hear from more than I want to most of the time. Because they're not gonna hold back and tell me what was good and what was bad, especially a district, and I'm very thankful for that. But to have some of those guys come up to me and to come to my kids as we're sitting there listening to other bands, in between those bands, and say, "That was a very musical performance. Thank you for what you did on the stage."
Wow!
And that means more to me than anything else. And so I talk about being the Harold Hill, rather than the smoke screen and the song and dance. Mine is about giving them the prime rib. And so you know the difference between the prime rib and the cheap ground beef from Walmart. in the music that you play. A lot of stuff we've played over the years we have no business playing because I don't have the skill level of musicians, but they still learn from every one of those pieces in some way, even if we didn't perform it.
Well, you've stayed excited about walking through the band room door every morning. What keeps that there?
I'm sure it's like this in most every band room, but the band room is a safe place for those kids, my kids, to come every day. And I've always been real fortunate to work at schools and with administrators that understood the importance of that. So my doors were open from the time I got there at 7:30 in the morning until 3 or 3:30 after school for another 30, 45 minutes after school, because that's where the kids felt safe to hang out. Even if they didn't practice, they could still hang out with their friends. And to answer your question, there's going to be one kid every morning that walks in and says good morning to me before I have a chance to say good morning to them, because they're glad to be there. And I know I've done their job. But then they're right behind them is going to be that kid who is dealing with something at home, or has just had a tragedy, or they're not doing well in their classes or whatever. And by me standing there at the door and saying, good morning, John, how are you today? And they know that relationship is there, and they're okay with saying, I'm not having a good day, Mr. T. Well, tell me about that, John. If you feel comfortable, tell me about that. And let's see if we can make the day a little bit better for you. And that's what did it for me. And then, of course, the musical things are great too. But those interpersonal relationships with those kids, I have a lot of children
Yes.
that I have raised or helped raise over the years. And fortunately, my own kids have not been jealous of that, because they see that that's part of who I am and part of what I do. But that's what drove me every single day. The musical success was great, but that stuff doesn't happen every day. But to see that one face of that one kid, or that one aha moment in rehearsal when they get it, or to watch them perform that solo at S&E, or play that solo at the spring concert, and whatever it is, that moment when I see that they feel good about what they've accomplished. And that's what drives me to go back every day. And if I start teaching private lessons, or if I figure out another way to continue my teaching career, that'll keep driving me throughout that process.
Well, thank you so much for giving us time today.
Certainly.
And for sharing your expertise and your life story with us. Bless you as you move forward.
Thank you.
Time to say bye-bye.
Bye, and good luck.